In this video, I'll walk through how to understand and simplify different powers of the imaginary unit I. Now, to start with, we have to know the definition of I. And by definition, I is the square root of -1. Where does that come from? It's got to be the starting point. That's the definition. You could do a little bit more diving into getting better idea of where that came from and why we use an imaginary unit. But for now, I want to focus on how to simplify that. So if we start with I equals the square root of -1, and if I square that, so we've got the -1, and if we were to square that, you see what we're doing is we're squaring a square root. And that square and square root are inverse operations, so they undo each other. So what we're left with is just the -1. So I can start making a list over here that if I is the square root of -1, then I squared, it's the square root of -1 squared, or -1. I cubed. If I pull out the I squared, because remember, I to the third power, we could rewrite that as I2 times I1, because 2 plus 1 equals 3. But that I squared is -1, and then we have -1 times I, so it's just a negative I, or the opposite of I. And now if I do I to the fourth, what if we use the I squared times I squared? So then it's -1 times -1, and that gives us a +1. Now this I to the fourth is the powerful one, because that I to the fourth, whenever we're simplifying bigger powers, we can pull those I to the fourths out. So when we look at this I to the 17ths, we're thinking how many I's can I remove as powers of 4? So if I had 4 groups of 4, that'd be 16. And then I'd have 1 left. Do you follow that? 4 times 4 is 16, plus 1 gives me the 17. So this I to the fourth is just a 1. And 1 to the fourth is still just 1. So what I'm left with is I. I to the 17th equals I. Now off to the side, let me show you some interesting arithmetic. If I do the 17 and then I'm dividing by 4. Why 4? Because remember what we're doing is we're trying to group them in 4s. And I'm not going to really be concerned with how many groups of 4 I can get. That there's 4 groups of 4 isn't important. What's really going to be important is this remainder, right? That remainder 1 tells me that that's what I to the 17th is equivalent to. It's equivalent to I to the 1. Let's try that with another example. How about the 105? I to the 105. So how many groups of 4 can I build? You know, it doesn't even matter how many groups there are, because the only thing that's going to matter is how many are left over. But I know that with the 100, that's 25 groups of 4, because 25 times 4 is 100. And then I get 1 more 4, and then an I. So do you see that this is 1 to the 25th power? So not 1 times 25, but 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, 1 times itself 25 times, and then 1 more time, and then we just get an I. So here we get an I again. But why was that the same? Why was that equivalent to I to the 17th? Let's look at that division. If I do 105 divided by 4, I'm going to get 26. And 26 times 4 would give me 4. And when I subtract, I get that remainder 1. So, you know what we could think of as a practice that would work every time for powers of I to the nth power is going to be I to the, I'm going to use a big capital R, where r, so in other words, the power that we get when we simplify is going to be the remainder, r for remainder, when we divide n by 4. So if I do n, whatever this exponent is, divided by 4, the quotient itself doesn't matter, but what I'm looking for is this remainder, right? And that remainder is going to be the power of I. I hope that this helps shed a little bit more light on how to simplify powers of I. Could I encourage you to ask if you need more clarification? And also, could I encourage you to, if you need to, if you're struggling with this, and start by memorizing this list. The only one you really have to memorize is the first one, because you could deduct the I squared, I cubed, I to the fourth. But if you're not fully grasping it yet, then start by memorizing each of these 4 powers of I to the 1, I squared, I cubed, I to the fourth. And then from there, eventually gain this better understanding of why they are what they are. But I hope that that helps you get a good grasp on this, and reach out if there's something else I can give you a little more clarification for.